Cool. So Alex did a great presentation, giving his perspective of the market and obviously making a lot of, let's say, statements or bold statement about the market from his opinion. We got, first of all, an opportunity to respond to Alex's presentation and kind of give the perspective panel here a chance to give their view. So you'll do that, first of all, by a quick introduction to yourself, and then we'll do a roundtable, giving each one of you a chance to respond to Alex's presentation and give your perspective. We'll start with Nicolas.
Hey, I'm Nicolas Thomas, solution architect at Canonical. So very easy to spot Ubuntu.
Andy Cathrow, run product management for Red Hat for virtualization.
Hi, I'm Monty Taylor. I work for HP, and weirdly, I'm actually wearing an HP logoed shirt, which I'm not sure I planned, but that seems to have happened. And I run I'm involved in the upstream infrastructure and CI projects for OpenStack.
Florian Haas, co-founder and CEO of hastexo. We are a professional services company that provides consulting and training around OpenStack.
So Florian, I added you without you knowing about it as the independent guy in the group here of all the vendors. So you'll help me to kind of balance the discussion here. So we'll start with, first of all, giving you a chance to respond. So we'll start with Nicolas first.
Sure. Will be hard to respond to that one 30 minutes presentation, but maybe one thing is, as open source editor forever, we are used to competition from the very beginning. Linux is the same thing. We have an open source project and competition on the field for customers, for services. And we've been used to that. We fight with my neighbors from the beginning, and we work together on the same code. And we don't think you need to. I heard a lot about controlling the code. It's the very nature of open source and having a foundation is that no one can actually really control the code. That has happened in other industries, in specifications and stuff like that, when you have someone putting so much money and efforts in defining the standards that they finally get it, control it totally. We don't want, no one wants that in open source. It's, and that's why you have a foundation with rules, etc. Everyone adhere to it and work on it. And we've been in OpenStack from the very beginning, and working in production with our customers, helping them to not only install but grow, scale, upgrade, operate, and have more and more customers and more ecosystem are running on top. That's the main. That's the main.
So you're basically saying that there's no major control over the OpenStack source code, and there is contribution, but
there is always people trying to, and that's why a foundation is so important, and good governance is so important. But the very nature of the open source licenses is really that you can, if you're not happy with someone trying to really fully control it, you can, at the last resort, fork and do your own stuff. But that's the main point. We want everyone to join and to participate and bring what they can bring to the rest of the community.
Okay, so I'll ask you later on more questions. Andrew, your chance, you've been mentioned quite a bit here, at least as a representative of Red Hat.
Sure, well, I'll be quick. I think the thing about the presentation, it talks about war, about beachheads, about competition, but OpenStack isn't about that. It's about community and collaboration. And if OpenStack was this warring community, you wouldn't all be here today. You wouldn't have a Havana release. It would have died on the vine really early on. So don't go away thinking there's some war and fractions within OpenStack. That's not what the community is. Right? And the foundation has done a great job with the governing board to keep it that way. So I think that's the number one feedback from the slide. The second one is really, I don't see control in submitting code. By submitting code, you're giving your product away, and it's your freedom. You're trusting the community. So if you look at code contributions, the reason why Red Hat, HP, and IBM rate highly is because the code goes to the community. You're not going to differentiate on the fringe with a, you could call it proprietary, or you could just call it some other open source projects. Everything goes into the core. So a good example is what was that HP did with O, and when we joined with Tusker, which is you could have your own proprietary management, or you could put it into OpenStack, into the core, not into the fringe. So I think that's where the code belongs, and that's what the community needs to drive towards.
So both of you are basically saying it's not a war, it's a collaboration. There is a thin balance between collaboration and competition, which I think Alex was trying to point to. How far is it collaboration versus competition, and how much that underground, if you'd like, movement is happening behind the scenes, is influencing what's actually happening at the open source community?
I think this message is more about press headlines and branding than it is about OpenStack. This isn't what we see in the community. It's not what you saw in Hong Kong. It's not what you see in the day-to-day. It's a way of building brand. And it's not how I don't think we do business from a community point of view.
Okay, fair point. Monty, your view.
So I think there's a little bit of, I think there is a little bit of both. I think that in the marketing and branding worlds, I think that there's clearly competition from everybody going on, from the businesses of the companies that are involved. But I also agree in the actual technical community, I think we've done a really excellent job inside of OpenStack of building a place where the people who are the, for the most part, there's always outliers that prove the point. But pretty much everybody is there to make OpenStack better, not necessarily to make their companies better. And a lot of times I think that people don't necessarily even know the companies that other people in the project are working for. It's not really about that at the technical level. That said, I do think that there is a real value in one of the things that Alex is talking about, which is and what you're saying with O and Tusker is actually coming in and doing your work there in OpenStack rather than the sort of obsession we see with some of the people in the community on wanting to keep OpenStack small so that these other open source communities don't get trampled, right? Like that's apparently important to us. I don't think that it is. I think that our goal is to make a good piece of cloud software, and if that needs features, if that needs to do something, then that's what we need to do. And it's not really my job to make sure that cloud scaling doesn't get scared, right? If by us adding a feature to OpenStack, cloud scaling gets pushed out of the way, then they probably weren't that strong in the first place. I don't think that I need to protect them, and I don't think that me adding that to OpenStack should negatively. There's nothing that we're doing to prevent you from doing those things. Even when we talk about O and Tusker, there's absolutely nothing about the existence of those that prevents Juju from being a completely viable choice for somebody to make. It doesn't push that out of the greater ecosystem, but it does mean that somebody can come straight to OpenStack and not necessarily have to go to a vendor if they don't want to. And so I think that I think there's a balance and there's a give and take, I think, in there in both ways.
So I'll skip you for a second because you had the 30 minutes unfair chance. So we'll skip to Florian first and give your perspective. And I will interject one more question about that. Do you think that OpenStack is an ecosystem or a product or both?
Okay, so that's two things for me to answer here. So number one, I also take mild umbrage at the war metaphor simply because I think they're disrespectful to those who have ever fought in or suffered through one. I tend to think of it more like a track meet, where we have all these different events, like all these different things that we work in. We all want to win, but ultimately we all do it in good spirit. And once the meet ends, we go back home, and then there's another event at some other meet where we meet again. So that's the metaphor that I like to use here more. As to the question of is it an ecosystem or is it a product? I think it is a community, and I think the difference between, but this is a very personal view of mine. I think the difference between a community and an ecosystem is A community operates based on rules, however informal or unwritten they may be. Those rules we tend to play with, and if you stop playing by those rules as a community, you tend to get kicked out. You tend to get shunned by the rest of the community. Whereas in an ecosystem, it's fundamentally amoral. It's all about survival. And I like to think of OpenStack more of a community that actually works together rather than an ecosystem where everyone just fends for themselves. That being said, Alex, I really like the fact that compared to May, you now rate your audience's intelligence significantly higher than that of a goat. So I like that.
So maybe, thank you, Florian. That's a compliment. To me, first of all, because the audience has always been very, very intelligent. Quick response. So I think there are two aspects to the presentation, and I agree, by the way, that the war is. I don't mean a war as a war. I mean we're being very respectful here, and sometimes we've been known to say some disrespectful things. Which, by the way, is not something that I ever authored, and I apologize to my colleagues and partners if I ever did anything personal. That's not the intent. But having said that, I believe that there are two important distinctions that we have to make. One is we do have a community here, and that's why I use the word coopetition, because it's collaboration and competition. The collaboration part is all about community, and we're all on the same page here that we're trying to make OpenStack better. But let's make sure we all understand that on the sales side and on the go-to-market side, there's actually competition. That each of the teams trying to sell it, they're going to be selling it against their competition, and they have a business model that also they're executing and they're leveraging the assets that they have. There is very much a competition going on, just like in a track and field, whoever comes first. I mean, ultimately what happens is, just like in Olympics, or in qualifiers, if you don't qualify, you're not going to play at the bigger leagues. So some of the smaller players or some that do not leverage their assets properly will end up losing. But there is very much a competition going on, in the salespeople and the money spent to actually deliver to customers. That is very much a competitive environment, and that will happen in every serious industry because there is no competition. That means there is nothing to play for.
So a question that I wanted to interject, I think both to Monty and to Andrea, and I think Nicolas as well, do you think that, for example, there's going to be one version of HEAT, there's going to be more than one version of HEAT? We're talking about a pass right now as well. Solom, for example, there's going to be one version of Solom versus multiple versions. That's kind of another way to ask the ecosystem versus a product thinking in that, and kind of an implicit question to that. If there is a project, how much anyone here can influence an existing project with a PTL, with a company, a big company with a lot of contributors behind it, like, for example, HEAT or other projects, how much they can actually practically influence an existing project with a PTL, and how much is it really a community-led project versus very much centric to the one who are actually leading their project?
So, thanks, because that's actually, I wanted to say something that responds to that question and also to respond to him a little bit. I think that you can absolutely, I think that is one of the things that makes this continue to be a community, and I really like that distinction, Florian. One of the things that makes it a community is that all of these companies that are competing on the market side, all have basically the same. They have the same set of rules and same playing field that they come in to operate on the project under. We don't have anybody in the OpenStack community who is more equal than any of the other participants. And that's one of the things that as we compete and as we move through these things, I think that actually provides a better incentive for the company's technical sides to play together as their business sides are competing with each other, because they're not having to fight they're not having to operate at an unequal footing. So that said, I think that very, very specifically, we've seen this like time and again. everybody can have influence. Anybody in this room can come in and have influence on projects that are existing right now by showing up and actually doing work. And it's actually the only way to show up and have any influence on any of the projects. Absolutely the only way is to actually show up with actual technical people making real technical contributions that are valued. And if you do that, and if there, and if like that's, and then you can make it. It's not, you don't have to buy in, you don't have to have sponsorship, you don't have to go make marketing messages and convince somebody with a business plan that your idea is good. You write some code and it's good, and that's how you influence it. And I think that that's one of the things that we've done exceptionally well in OpenStack, sort of surprisingly well given, you know, given the situation and how many players are involved. Yeah. So, so that, yeah, I think absolutely that's
okay. So you.
Yeah, just to second that, don't start by thinking you need to have the influence. You have the influence. It's open. Just solve a bug, translate the documentation, add, do things. You don't. It's open to anyone. You don't need to be on whatever. Just doing a bit more and more of that, you get influence. Users speak up, you get influence. And that's users. That's the most important. Users or customers, depends where you place yourself. Both the cooperation and the competition is here to serve users. We have APIs, and under the API you have a lot of choices. You can choose us, or you can choose that gentleman. You can choose HP gears, or you can choose IBM or something else. You're not locked. So you can work, start betting on OpenStack, and you know that you will get the best servers, because those guys will fight to get the best servers to serve you, but they will not change the API. You will keep the same API. So you can keep what's running on top and change and get from that, well, good competition, I would say, instead of bad ones. And
yeah.
still...
So again, sorry for interjecting here, because we're running a little bit out of time.
Yeah.
I want to give one I mean, we have a very short panel now on a topic that, for me, is very interesting, so I could continue that discussion for hours. But I want to make sure that, first of all, we're serving the people here in the room. Are there any questions? Yes?
What would you like?
The question is about licensing.
Yeah, so I think that I would have agreed with you. Actually, I agreed with you when we started the...
Yes, so the question, so just
yeah.
to repeat the question was about the licensing, and what was specific about the license?
Yeah. Right. So
sure. Okay.
Yeah,
so you got the question about the
so
Apache
when we started
license.
OpenStack, I thought we were idiots for picking the Apache license, and I yelled at people a lot, and they overruled me because, well, Rackspace just picked Apache. So I didn't really have any control over it at that point in time. And I would have agreed with you. I think I've changed my mind, and this is why. I think that the GPL, I have a letterpress printed framed copy of the GPL v3 preamble by my desk. Like, so I'm going to be very clear as to where my allegiances lie here. I think that the GPL is a tool, same as how software patents are ridiculous because patents are a tool for the industrial age. I think that the copyleft licenses aren't effective in the world of distributed systems anymore. I think that GPLing OpenStack wouldn't make it any more likely for people to contribute code back. AGPL'd code has essentially been used only by people wanting to do open core sales and to drive proprietary license sales. In general, I think the intention is good by a lot of the people doing that, but effectively in the marketplace, this is actually where we wind up with at the moment. In running services, you can't force me to contribute back. You can't do it. What I can do is I can incentivize you. We go the other route now. We don't do the stick, we do the carrot. We incentivize you to contribute back because not contributing back costs more.
right? Not contributing back means that you're carrying a higher development cost personally, and it makes absolutely, if you look at the people that are working on OpenStack, it makes absolutely no financial sense for you to fork OpenStack at all. It's a stupid idea. And I think that that's where we have to go these days is by incentivizing participation rather than by forcing somebody to give back.
One last comment and we'll
yeah, I'd just like to add one more thing to that. It's not just about the license. One other thing that I think is very, very smart about the way OpenStack handles code contributions is the fact that our CLA does not include copyright assignment, which massively facilitates and decomplicates the process for a lot of specifically corporate contributors. There's contributors that still deal with legal teams, corporate legal teams that have concerns about IP, about the blanket royalty-free patent license that is in the CLA, etc. But it has made the contribution process and the ease of becoming a contributor much better than we've typically seen in GPL projects that have traditionally very often relied on copyright assignment. So that is another thing where OpenStack has actually made it easier. And as for someone actually taking the code, relicensing it, and then running off with it, that would effectively amount to an OpenStack fork. And like Monty has been saying, and lots of other people have been saying, in fact, there's one of the few instances where I totally agree with Boris. He has said that publicly recently. If you do that, if you're running your own OpenStack fork in any way, shape, or form, you're kind of stupid, and you totally deserve it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mark
so we want to conclude because we're running out of time.
Oh, sorry.
So we'll keep it as a last comment. We're just the distance between you and the coffee break. So choose which one you want to be, which side you want to be. I would say that if I kind of conclude the message here is that it's a big community project, and I think in retrospect, if you look at other community projects, there is politics, there is different agendas of people trying to influence in different directions, which is very acceptable. Relatively speaking, I think there is a chance for almost anyone to influence, and I think that's kind of the main message, knowing that they know the play game and they play according to the game. I think, Shmuel, you're going to talk a little bit about your experience in doing that, and how do you balance between contribution and the other things that you're doing. So there's a talk of someone who actually did that in this room. There's going to be a talk by Monty about the StarkForge. So if you want to contribute a project that is not necessarily part of the core project, but you still want to contribute, there is another something that is a little bit more light process to actually do that. So there's different ways to contribute, and we'll do some talks that will talk about that. With that, I will conclude, and we'll continue afterwards with the session, breakout session. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.